Welcome to the Becoming Body Smart podcast, where we unlock the secrets of sustainable health and fitness and help you master your health habits. If you're tired of quick fixes, generic blueprints, and chasing short-term results, you're in the right place. It's time to become Body Smart.
Good morning. How's everybody? Who is excited? If you're excited for the upcoming holidays, drop a 1 in the chat. If you're nervous about the upcoming holidays, drop a 2 in the chat. If the holidays make you nervous or anxious, or I know it's a common thing that people struggle with the holidays, that it brings up a lot of tough feelings and things like that. I'm excited, so I'm gonna drop a 1 in there. But I'm gonna drop a 2 in there too, actually, because I'm also nervous about the fact that we're all gonna be at the cabin and everybody can come this year. And that is intense. And we all get along pretty well. There's usually not much conflict, but the family's big. Um, my wife's family has, through marriage and divorce, or marriage and remarriage, or death and remarriage, there's 17 kids in the family. But we usually don't do stuff with all 17, but still they have 9 kids on Shannon's side of the family. And so, um, I think 7 of the kids will be there, and each of them have like 4 or 5 kids. So it's a lot of people. There'll be probably close to 40 people there, and that's intense. And you're all kind of stuck in one cabin. It's gonna snow, and so it somewhat limits how much people wind up spreading out. And so, as excited as I am for the holidays, and it seems like most people are excited, I'm also a little nervous about being in a tight space with a lot of people. And it's fun, and like I said, we typically don't have conflicts, nothing major, but it's just, it stresses me out to be around that many people. I'm not a enclosed spaces with lots of people person. And so, yeah, holidays can be really, really fun, and they are exciting, and I'm glad that we're all excited for the holidays coming up. Um, but at the same time, we got to make sure that we're staying mentally healthy, um, and able to still enjoy the holidays. So we've got our list of our tips for, our top 10 tips for surviving the holidays. So we'll post that in here, and then we'll go through them. So here's our top 10 tips for surviving the holidays, so that your relationships and your mental health does not take a major nosedive during this time. And there are other things in here that we could have included, for sure, and so we'll bring some of those up too. I don't know. Any opening thoughts, Mark?
Excuse me, oh my gosh, I'm like dying today. Yeah, I just let us know what like if there's any tips that you guys have add to these
Oh yeah.
when stuff comes up or when someone says something insane. I feel like I don't have a big problem with that in my family. Like people don't tend to say insane things, but I know some families do. So we'd love to hear what tips that you guys have. Yeah, there you go. Drop those in there, and
Yeah, drop those in the comments. We'd love to hear your tips, because we are by no means the experts on this necessarily, right? This is family conflict can come from all kinds of different angles and situations. So we'd love to hear your advice.
yeah, those are all my opening thoughts.
Okay, sweet. Well, let's get rolling then. So the first one is stop and think before you respond. I think this is probably a good piece of advice. And the reason why it's number 1 on there is because it's something I really struggle with. I tend to gut react to just about everything in life. And it can get me in trouble sometimes. And so, yeah, stopping and thinking before you respond to something somebody says It's something that I've actually, it's funny how I can go into that mode a little bit better around certain people. Um, and so there's a couple of people in my life that I have to really be careful to stop and think like, do I want to give him the reaction that he's looking for, or do I want to like think about it and give the reaction that I'd really actually rather I said at the end of the night when I am thinking about, oh, why'd you get into it with him, you moron? I should have said this instead. I try to think about what that should be that I should have said, right, before I open my mouth. Um, and so that is helpful to just stop and think before you respond, especially um, and maybe that should have been one of the tips, especially about certain topics. So you know, with certain people and certain topics that there are hot button issues, right? They usually say religion and politics, don't bring those up at family parties or social gatherings. Um, and that's usually pretty true. Be careful with those topics, how you bring them up, and if somebody else brings them up, um, you know, you may need to set boundaries there or things like that about, hey, let's just not talk about that. Um, you know how I feel. I know how you feel. Let's just keep it there for today, so that it doesn't turn into conflict. Um,
I
yeah,
just love that there's a specific person that you had in mind when that came up. Like,
yeah,
but I think all of us have those, well, one or two people,
yeah.
um, and it's interesting. I think just recognizing, with this is like recognizing what are things that tend to trigger you, um, to kind of respond explosively or respond really negatively, um, and this has to do with your thinking style too, right? Cameron and I both talked. I don't know if we talked about here, but each other, like we kind of process as we're talking, right? Like we're
Mm-hmm.
thinking as we're
Oh
talking,
yeah, totally.
and for like figuring out what we're thinking, it works really great for like responding well in high emotion times, maybe not as good. And so just having that thought, right, kind of thinking through some of these things beforehand can help you be better prepared when those moments come.
Right.
And I think it was Viktor Frankl who said, between stimulus and response there is a space, and in that space is our freedom to choose.
Mm, I
So
like it.
just choosing to take a breath, or maybe like 10 breaths
Yeah.
before before we go and dive in and start. And I think this just involves, um, like checking our assumptions at the door, right? So
Mm,
often when we just start responding, we haven't really considered, like we haven't clarified. And so this actually, I think this. Anyway, I think this is also a helpful point that goes along with this is clarifying, what the person said, what they meant, right? Maybe
mm,
repeating back what they said to them, or
yeah, I love that.
to us, to clarify if we're actually getting it right. Because
Right. Asking clarifying questions, things
asking
like that.
clarifying questions. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Because otherwise, we might assume something that actually wasn't intended.
Right.
And so just being really clear, because again, like sometimes those things, it just shoots the emotion up high, and we kind of go on the attack. But just being
Right.
able to stop and to think and to consider what's actually going on, and is it worth getting into the argument
Right.
place.
Well, I think that plays into the third one, right? The choose your battles. Like, be careful what things you bring up, what topics you're gonna battle on, and probably don't do that publicly. Like, if there is something you feel like is a conflict you need to have resolved, like pull that person aside and be like, "Hey, I was just wondering about this. Can we chat about it?" Right? Don't do that in public so much if there is something you need to address, and then choose your battles wisely. Like, don't don't do it in public. uh, that usually, because nobody likes feeling ganged up on, and especially if you're dealing with an issue or a topic or something like that with just one person who has that viewpoint and everybody else in the room has a different one. when somebody feels ganged up on, it gets ugly really quick. And so be careful with that. And then be careful too with that fourth one. Keep a sense of humor, but don't make fun. It's really easy in family situations, especially, to kind of poke fun at one another and things like that. And that's honestly part of the fun of being with family. But you got to be careful to not let that creep into an argument or a just a topic that you don't agree with somebody on. Using humor can be dangerous because you feel like you're making fun of them, not just their point that they were trying to make. And sometimes that's really hard to differentiate between the two anyway, because we're some of us get pretty married to our points. And so if you're attacking my point, you're attacking me. And so if you do that through humor, it feels like you're being made fun of. And so you have to be really careful how you use humor, even though, we have a lot of history and things like that where we can go back years and tease people about one of the common ones in Shannon's family is the bouncy ball. One of her brothers and a bouncy ball gets brought up every time we're together. He cried about the bouncy ball. Anyway, so things like that can be funny, but they can also be hurtful. Just depends on the time. So be careful how you use past history and humor. Sometimes it can just be inflammatory instead. I think one of the best tips there, as far as conflict, is refuse and diffuse. Refuse to kind of go down the rabbit hole if you know that's what's being done. Like if somebody's trying to bait you into going down and talking about a certain topic, refuse to go down that topic and diffuse it by bringing up something else that's maybe related but different, that's less inflammatory. All right, Michael says, ask the matriarch of the family to create some family rules around discussion topics. Everyone will listen to grandma, at least at first. And then stern looks can stop things before they get too far out of hand. At least that works in my in-laws' house. Yeah, I think that's a good idea to set some ground rules, especially if there has been known conflicts in the past. And be careful as you set those ground rules to not call any one person out. Like, Gary, no talking about this. Like, that may kind of put Gary already on the defensive, right? I love that, Michael. I agree. I think that's a good way to do it. So, any tips like that, keep them rolling. We love that. If you have any other advice, tips for the holidays of things that work in your family, let us know. We want to hear what works for you guys.
So
Oh, Terry, perfect. I would consider myself an expert on family conflict. Oh, that's too bad, but it happens in every family. It has been good for me to learn that I am only responsible for my behavior and not others' emotions. Oh, that's true. I think, um, making sure that our mental headspace of like, okay, I'm only responsible for me. I can't choose whether or not they like everything. I can't choose whether or not everybody's having an amazing time. I can do the best that I can do. And if people choose to be, choose to have conflicts, choose to have bad behavior and things, I can't always do everything about that. Yeah, that's good. It can be rough at times, huh? I know the holidays for a lot of people are bittersweet. What were you gonna say, Mark?
so, so I think that's a great point, right? The idea of you can only control you.
Mm-hmm.
My family has a joke. And I was like, remember the remember the year Mark ruined Christmas? Um,
See
like that.
those hurtful jokes from past
Yeah.
history.
Well, and for like years that used to bother me, and now like I think it's hilarious, right? Like I'll joke about it, and I had to reframe it, right? The recognizing that I can only control myself, and like for me, was it really worth getting hit? And obviously, like they joke about it because they love me. So the story behind it is this is years ago. I was probably like 12 or 13, and my brother was 15. And we both wanted I wanted a guitar for Christmas. He wanted a bass guitar. The funny thing about this is that neither one of I never learned to play guitar. My brother semi learned to play bass. Like we haven't I still have the guitar, but I haven't touched it in years. Anyway, so he wanted the specific bass guitar, right? It had like some sunburst pattern on it or something. Anyway, um I by accident ended up finding them in the back of one of our closets. I don't remember what I was looking for, but I asked him. I was like, "Do you want to know what it was?" And I told him, and it wasn't the exact one. It was the same brand, but it wasn't the exact one that he wanted. And so he like tried to act all excited on Christmas morning, and he just wasn't. And my mom was like, "Okay, what's up?" And he's like, "Well, Mark found," and so
Mark ruined Christmas.
that's how I ruined Christmas. Um,
That's funny.
and then another thing, like I am not a huge board games fan, but I used to like get really bent out of shape when I was younger when I like would lose. Um, and so
When
like
I was
recognize
younger.
when I was younger last year. No.
Right.
Um, so but that was not my family problem, that was not a them problem. And so there's two ways that I've dealt with it. Sometimes I like recognize that about myself, and there's certain games that I just don't play. And so I'll still like sit around the table with the family and talk with them and joke with them, but I'm just not actively playing the game. And then sometimes I'll just play, and I had to be like, you know what, it's not a big, like winning doesn't really matter. What matters is like getting to enjoy time with my family. And so one, like definitely recognizing that we can't control other people and what they're saying or doing, but also recognizing that sometimes we have things to work on, right? There's issues that we need to resolve and different ways for us to approach the problem, and that we can help contribute to that more fun, enjoyable, less emotionally charged environment as well. And
Yeah.
so, just try not to ruin Christmas. The moral of that story.
Exactly. So some of the tips for that, there's a couple others here. So don't drink too much is a good way to not ruin Christmas.
Yeah,
Um,
'cause you have to pee all the time. That's just the worst, right? That's what we're going
right.
with. And that was that.
Exactly. But that's a tip for a lot of people that can be important. That uh, sometimes drinking too much causes loose lips, and as they say, loose lips sink ships.
That's
And so, yeah, you just have to be careful there. Um, I like this one: solve the problem, not the person. So often we'll hear things said like, "Oh, you always do this," or "you always," using terms like always or never or things like that. When people hear that, it again automatically puts them on the defensive. So be careful that if there is some kind of conflict or like a scheduling mishap or whatever, make sure to try to solve the problem at hand and not try to fix the person and the way they always do things. So
I have a sister that she's just always late. Um,
always.
Always. No, like, but truly, like, I would say at least 95% of the time. So anyway, it used to drive our whole family crazy. Um, and so one, like what we ultimately had to recognize was that like what matters more, right? Is just getting to be there and spend time with her and enjoy like whenever she's able to get there, great. And that yeah, every family has that person. So true, Lori. So true.
It's so
Um,
true.
but that's what we just had to. We still joke about it. We'll be like, okay, so she said she'll be here around 2. Let's add about an hour or two to that time, and it's usually
Oh
pretty
yeah.
accurate. Um, and so that's typically how we deal with it, right? Is it's just like, you know what? She'll get here when she gets here, and that'll be great, right? Like we're super excited to see her, and it'll be fun. Um, 2, when it like really matters, we'll just tell her that the time is like an hour earlier than it actually is. Um, if you don't know who that person is, it's probably you. I don't know. I can't think of anyone who's ever done like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if I would tell my brother before, yeah, yeah, right, totally, totally. Well, so that's funny, Lori, right? My mother-in-law, 5:30. My dad, I'm pretty sure my dad adopted this from my grandpa. My grandpa, like, if it was, let's say that we're going to a movie or something, and it starts at 5:30. At like 4:45, like 4:30, no, he's like, we got to go, right? Like he's getting on us, and we used to laugh about that for years. And so now my dad, it'll be like half an hour or something, and he's already outside in the car waiting, car on. Like, we better get going now. Even though we have like reserved seats at the place, we better.
Yeah.
So it's funny, but I think that's just like recognizing those idiosyncrasies in your family, right? Like recognizing just some of those personality traits and finding ways to work around it, or just accept it and learn to be okay with that, right? And recognize that, is it more important to have, you know, XYZ thing, or is it more important to spend time with that person and make sure that everyone feels loved? And
Yeah.
sometimes, right, there are workarounds that you've got to do to make, to respect one another and to respect what you're doing. But
Yeah.
I think just being able to consider that, right, like make it about, mm, solving the problem, not fixing the person. Yeah.
Right. Right. Well, I love I love that she has her mother-in-law, Lori. You have your mother-in-law come at a half hour late because that means she's going to be there early. And I get that, not wanting sometimes the meddling. I love it. But you just have to find out what works to manage those expectations better. So point number 8 on here is you can only control you, which we kind of brushed on before. Terry, that was perfect comment. Like, you only can control you. So don't get too stressed out about everybody else's experience and how they're feeling and thinking and doing and what they're saying. Um, be careful with that. Have realistic expectations is number 9. And I think that's important, to not think like, oh, this year is going to be magical, if it's not always magical every year. um, or even if it is, like the fact that when you gather a lot of people together, it's not often as magical as you'd hoped. So just have realistic expectations and enjoy it for what it is and for what it becomes. I think that's important. And I wanted to get to number 10 because I think there's so many layers to number 10, our 10th point. And lots of things that we could go into with that. But it's keep up your routines. So I think that can be so critical, to keep up your healthy routines. So if you have established routines now, like exercise, your eating habits, your sleep habits, if you're seeing somebody for mental health, keep seeing that person through the holidays for mental health. Those types of things, keep up those habits and patterns, because they're very, very important for success. If you want to not be tired and irritable and on edge of conflict, getting good sleep and waking up and exercising, really, really important.
Yes.
Let's see.
Yeah, read
Shannon
Shannon's comment. It was really good.
last night, our boys were talking, and my one son started saying something in jest about my other son, and before he could even finish, that son stopped him and said, "No, too far. That's a hot button topic for me because I'm self-conscious about it." How is it that my boys are more mature than me? But I really loved how, instead of just trying to laugh it off, he didn't take offense, also shut it down before he would take offense. Yeah, I thought that was awesome. It's always amazing when your kids are like more emotionally mature than you are, right? Like, it really was impressive how he did it. Like, and there was a brief moment of awkward there with it, when he kind of had to like look into my other son's eyes and be like, "No, I'm serious when I say that. Like, don't bring that up. That's a hot button issue for me. I'm self-conscious about that. Like, please don't talk about that." And it diffused it. It was without creating conflict, without him snapping back. What we tend to do is fire back at other people. Um, and it diffused that really, really well. It's like, wow, I know, I was impressed. Sometimes he shows a lot of emotional maturity that is kind of hard to imagine that came from me. It doesn't. It comes from Shannon. Anyway, so yeah, keeping up on those routines and habits, really, really important. Was the last one. Mark, what do you want to say about that, or about
Yeah.
Shannon's comment?
Well, I think about the routines part, just that can be really helpful. So one thing, and recognizing what are your routines that tend to drop first.
Mm.
So like I love just sitting down and talking with people. That's one of my favorite things. What happens a lot of times though is all of a sudden it's 1 o'clock in the morning and the kids all wake up at like 6 or 7 in the morning, right? And so recognizing that like I want to have enough energy to be able to deal with whatever's coming the next day. That even though like as much as I want to, and sometimes you do, right? Sometimes you stay up late and you talk, and like that's part of the holidays, and recognizing that, but also maybe being better about like, hey, you know what? I want to talk. Let's talk more tomorrow. We got a couple days together. I need to get to sleep so that I show up better. Right? Recognizing that. And then I think this just goes back to what Shannon's comment, right? Like, what are your hot button issues, right? What are some things that tend to trigger you or to, um, you know, fire you up? And so recognizing those beforehand and being willing to have those frank conversations, right? Like sometimes that is a bit awkward. You said it was a moment a bit awkward when you had to stare into his eyes and say like, oh yeah, he's actually serious about this thing. But I feel like most people tend to respect that, right? When you can be really honest about like, hey, this is an issue for me, and I recognize that this is like this is my issue. It's not a problem with you again, and so like, can we not talk about this because that's a sensitive topic, or I'm self conscious, or this really causes me a lot of grief, or whatever it is, and just being able to diffuse it before it snowballs into something bigger.
Yeah, yeah. That was impressive when he did that. So, not a perfect list of holiday tips, but some of the things that we thought of, um, or just feel like are helpful to be able to, not blow up your holiday season and to, keep having fun. We talk a lot about how relationships are one of the most important factors in longevity, that it helps our brains to function better, that it helps our blood pressure to be lower, that there's all these factors in healthy living that keeping and maintaining healthy relationships can create. And so family relationships are some of the most important relationships that we have. And they can cause a lot of conflict and turmoil and heartache and heartbreak, or they can be very, and probably both, but they can be very healing and helpful and supportive and loving and great. So we want them to be the latter. We want them to be all of the good things. And so using some of these tips to help get through the holidays so that you can have a wonderful time that's enjoyable and peaceful, that's the key. So yeah, hopefully that was helpful, and we loved your guys' comments. Thank you so much for commenting. Feel free anytime to drop comments and wisdom like that. Thanks so much from everybody. Yeah, that was great. So tomorrow we've got one more call before Thanksgiving break. So tomorrow evening, come and join us. Yeah. Any final thoughts, Mark?
We'll see you tomorrow.
All right. See you then.
Thanks for listening to the Becoming Body Smart podcast. If you have questions, thoughts, or want to continue the conversation, reach out to us on our socials or join our community. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It helps us bring you even more valuable content. Remember, sustainable health is a lifelong journey, and we're here to support you every step of the way. Live longer, live stronger, and become body smart.